we are patiently waiting for Mr. James Millton to join us. Hello, everybody. Hello, Rocker Chef, to the party. So tonight we are talking to the very, very, very infamous James Millton. So James, for those of you who don't know, was instrumental in biodynamics in New Zealand. Some would say the pioneer of biodynamics in New Zealand. He set up Millton with his lovely wife, Annie, way back in 1984. So has been incredibly instrumental in how the New Zealand, but hello, Welma, Muse, crew, Rocker Chef, and hello, Mark. Nice to see you all. And here is lovely James now. We will continue with his story in just 1 second. Let's bring him in. Hopefully we don't have any technical issues tonight, like we have done for every other night this week. Hello. What's the bet that the Wi-Fi is going to be terrible again in little old New Zealand? Let's try with James now. Here he is.
Good morning. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Mr. Millton?
It's worked. It's worked.
I know. Is this your first Insta Live?
What do you call that?
We're on Instagram, and this is called an Insta Live because we're talking together.
Yes, I'm afraid to say it kind of is, yes.
So I broke your Insta Live virginity.
Exactly, and this time last year I was at your shop with the lovely
Anna Flower Day
doing a tasting.
Another one of our very, very, very good friends, biodynamic friends, aren't they?
Oh, she's an angel, yes.
How are you?
No, I asked you first.
I'm good. We're great. Today we just relaunched the restaurant. For those of you who are watching, the laundry reopened today for the first time since we closed post-COVID. So we're excited to be bringing a new general store, wine shop, coffee offering to the lovely folk of Brixton.
And this is just around the corner from where you have been before.
Exactly, exactly.
And how come you're doing Insta Live now when you should be charismatic front of house?
Because we're only open during the day, darling.
Oh, that's right. It's night time there now, isn't it?
It is, yes. So tomorrow morning I'll be back on show. Anyway, we're not here to talk about me. Nobody wants to listen to me.
Oh, come on.
Everybody wants to hear from you. I was just giving a little spiel about how incredibly amazing you are, you and your lovely wife Annie, and your vineyards in Gisborne. I was briefly touching on the history of Millton, but I'm not gonna steal your thunder here. And I think I don't think we've ever had the opportunity to talk through it in great detail. So I'm really interested to hear how Millton came about. I mean, it was way back in, what year was it?
1984 was when we started making our own wine.
Yeah, so you'd been traveling for a bit before that, before you grounded back in Gisborne, hadn't you?
Yes.
So
well, I got kicked out of school for making wine. You know. Right.
Okay.
And they told me to go, and then I came to Gisborne. This is where Annie's family comes from originally, and we got together up here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we travelled to Australia and France and Germany and did those sort of things. And then I was going to study in Germany, and we decided to come back home for Christmas. And she said, come up to Gisborne here. There's lots of exciting things happening. Now, this was when was that? Yeah, 1980. And,
1980.
You know, you have an intuitive response. We all have intuitive responses. And in this instance, it's just an example of following something that's kind of like leading you before.
And so, talk to me. I mean, I hadn't really touched on exactly where Gisborne is. For those of you who are listening tonight who don't know where Gisborne is, we're on the east coast of New Zealand. James is
that the way around?
No, the other way. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So we're pretty much on James on the east coast of the North Island. So proximity to the sea here is really, really key for this wine region. And another really interesting point, which I guess a lot of people probably won't be aware of, is Gisborne is the first wine region in the world to see the sun. Is that right?
Yes. Well, you know, due to the position of the international date line, it's just out there offshore, and we're about 8 kilometers from the coast. And when the sun rises here, it's the first place, it's the first city in the world to see the sun. First wine region. I think most our neighbour's vineyard might be one of the first vineyards in the world to see the sunrise.
Wow.
So by the time it comes to your place, we've used it.
Yeah, haven't you just? You're taking all the good energy from it.
Well, there's quite a lot of energy that happens here, and it's quite interesting because the first indigenous, the Maori people, arrived here in 1200 on that side of our little bay here, and then the first colonists came here in 1769 on the other side of the bay. So there's something about the sun coming in and the energy that comes here that there seems to be a lot of firsts.
And your biodynamic pull that you've had on the entire nation, I think we call you the pioneer of biodynamics in New Zealand, because your vineyards were the first organic and biodynamic vineyards in New Zealand. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I think so. Yes, yes.
And
yes,
have they always? Say it with conviction, James. Say it with conviction.
Indeed.
So have you, when you planted in the early 1980s, did you always plant and intend to be organic or biodynamic, or did that kind of evolve over time? Tell us about that part of the journey.
Well, Annie's father planted the first vineyards in 1969, and that was in the era of huge chemical farming using. Oh my God, I need one of those too. That was in the time of chemical farming, and Annie and I were young 23-year-olds, idealistic, and when we came back in 1980, and we wanted to do it without using chemicals, and it was to do it organically. In fact, we called it integrated pest control, because that was kind of like the words that were being used then.
Were they?
And organics is still quite new, and biodynamics is quite new too. Admittedly, biodynamics have been happening for a long time in the rest of the world, mainly agriculturally, but not viticulturally.
So you quite often, and I've heard you say this many a time to me in real life, and I've also seen you to write this quote as well, about standing on the rooftop of another kingdom. And I think that really that resonates really strongly for me for biodynamics and who we are as living and breathing organisms and how our environment reacts around us. So to talk us through that quote a little bit.
Well, it's quite funny because you have to, when you're working in the vineyards and you're working in the land and you're out there in the rural environment, we have this little phrase called "You're not standing on dirt, but the rooftop of another kingdom." So tread carefully. And when you get this thought pattern into the people you're working with, they suddenly realize, oh my golly, I should look after this soil and this dirt and this terroir that we have. We should look after it nicely. And it's just interesting that this is a very rural expression, you know, to look after those who are around you. And especially at this time, you know, in this crazy times that we're going through, we've got to be kind and look after everybody.
We do have to be kind and look after everyone, you're right.
And now we're not standing on dirt, but the rooftop of another kingdom, with this COVID silly thing, it's now become a urban awareness as well. You know, you've got to look out for things.
You do have to look, and it's what I love about biodynamics and the ethos and the philosophy around
Evening ants.
Is this respect that as biodynamic producers you have for your land and your people and your teams and your families. You don't tend to see that as quite as evidently as other vineyards throughout the world. And it was just, I remember when I came down to visit you for the first time after promoting and flogging your wines up here for the last 15 years, finally managing to stand down on your kingdom and really understand and feel the energy that was in your vineyards. And for that, I'll truly always be thankful. So thank you for having me. I remember you...
Any day.
very frequently talking about the texture of wine. So I just wanted to touch on, you always talk about textures of wine and how they kind of pull together to form this palette and this profile. But equally, we haven't touched on the kind of the main grapes that we see from Gisborne. So it's predominantly white grapes and white aromatics, right?
Well, yes, aromatics and white, and now there's more red wines coming on as well, but not so much, because this is quite a how do you say, I don't want to use the word bulk, but it produces quite a lot of wine for mass consumption. We don't have to promote it because everybody's drinking it.
It's already there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there is, I mean, I don't know the actual facts and figures of the size of Gisborne's wine production, but we don't need to go into that right now. But I think as a small producer and a family-owned producer, you were by far one of the very first from Gisborne, weren't you?
No, there was Mataferro wines, and that was established by the late Dennis Irwin, who passed away sadly about 6 weeks ago. Okay. And he was making exceptional wines, and he was making wines from real grapes then in those days. This is back in the late 70s. Whereas as we progressed through and the demand became greater, people started cutting corners, you know, as commercial winemakers kind of do, I'm sorry to say. And so it was ourselves and Mataferro who are making real wines, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And that means, and then as we progress, we're making now wines that don't have very much added to it. Like we don't add acid or sugar or water or enzymes or yeast or bacteria or nothing. It's just love.
It's all about the love. So yeah, this is where I was going with it, with the texture kind of comment that I made before. You know, you're all about the terroir and the land and the environment and how you can really get those grapes to speak for themselves, as opposed to, like you say, adding acid and sugar and all those other elements that potentially some other...
I'm confused here whether I have my cup of tea or a glass of wine at 6:30 in the morning.
I have the wine, James. I say okay. It's okay.
Yeah, good.
So let's, well, first and foremost, the majority of your collections, and I know you have different tiers, you've got Crazy by Nature, you've got the Estate tier, and then you've got Clos de St. Anne.
Milton, the Clos de St. Anne, yeah, and Libbiamo.
And Libbiamo. So we've got several kind of tiers or collections of wines within the Millton family fold. And they all have their own unique characteristic and style. And the Libbiamo range, well, is Libbiamo just one wine in that range, or is there several?
No, we've got about 3 now. We can't help ourselves. It's just another one happens, you know, each year.
It just happens. So why don't you briefly talk us through this idea of texture and how you relate it to a wine, particularly, obviously, from your vineyards?
Right. Let's go back a little bit to biodynamics. Bio is about life and dynamic is about energy. And so we're trying to get the energy in the soil and the earth, the water, the air, and the light to come into the fruit of the vine. And so when a vine is given freedom to grow like that, in other words, it doesn't have protection from pests and diseases because we don't apply that stuff. So the vine sets up its own defense mechanism, which is, and this is very interesting. It sets up its own defense mechanism against hot and cold and insects and any fungus that could be around that's not desirable. And so in doing that, it produces polyphenols, or what could be called a bitter substance in the sap of the vine, which then goes into the fruit of the vine. So we get phenolics in the juice of the wine. And those phenolics, and this is a thing that's coming in now in the next 10 years, these phenolics are not bitter, they're sweet and supple and succulent and make your mouth water. And they are the biological antioxidants in the resulting wine. So we don't have to use any, if much, sulfur dioxide, the chemical antioxidant. So consequently, when we're talking about texture, we want to leave all those textures in the wine. It's just not about sniffing, sipping, and spitting. It's about touch, pause, engage. Yes? And that's where you get the texture in your whole mouth, right in the architecture of your mouth, between sweet, sour, salted, stringent, and umami.
Well, I had that down as one of my points to speak to you about tonight, was umami. And I've never heard anyone else refer to their wines as having this umami. How and why do you think Gisborne offers your grapes and your vineyards this umami characteristic that you speak of?
Well, firstly, the biodynamics, but secondly, because our soils are very young, they've got a lot of silt and clay in them. Silt makes the perfume and aroma of the wines, and the clay gives it the texture under here. So, you know, it's very like this. And as a result of that, the proximity to the sea, you have this air coming in, the sea breeze coming in. And so in the relationship to flavor, we're trying to see the particular flavors that come from our environment. It's different where there is limestone growing, or where there is quartz, or where there is granite, or there is silica. You know, each one of these wines, you can taste the wines from Burgundy, and you can almost see what the soil, and you can almost imagine what the soil is like in the vineyards, if they're true.
If they're true and they express themselves appropriately, right?
Yeah. So umami is like a sense of deliciousness. And the interesting thing, I wonder, the interesting thing with this biological antioxidant is that when you put that wine you have with you there now, and you put it in your mouth, and then you swallow it, and then you count how many seconds it takes until your mouth waters.
It's watering.
Now, 4 seconds, you see? And so that's kind of like this sense of deliciousness. And when you take the glass of wine and you drink it like a Chenin Blanc, it's going to make your mouth water after 2 seconds or so, very quickly, like that. Whereas a Viognier is going to be a little bit slower in making your mouth water. So there's a whole different characteristic between our family of wines as to what kind of food they can be enjoyed with.
And of your collection of family of wines, do you...
I'm not being too serious, am I?
No, totally not. You're being very informative. Thank you. And I'm sure everybody's enjoying it. I wanted to ask if you had a favorite wine or grape varietal. And then I would like to ask you some learnings or the evolution of how you think some of your aromatics have evolved over the last 30 years in Gisborne.
Favorite. You know, you never really have a favorite child. And so therefore I don't necessarily have a favorite, but I have... Which
of your family wines are you drinking currently? What do you like? What do you like to drink at the moment?
I just love Chenin Blanc, but I really, really love Viognier. Because there are two different ends of the spectrum in terms of taste, but I just like the way the Chenin Blanc grape variety grows. You know, it's nice and straight and the fruit's beautiful. And from Chenin Blanc you can make dry, not so dry, little bit sweeter, sweet, very sweet, and sparkling wine. So it's very versatile, and it's very delicious. It's a very delicious grape variety. And like the big aha moment was in the Loire Valley. No, actually in our first vintage, and we had a bottle of 1959 Moulin Touché, and we took the wine like this and tasted and went, and it was a little bit sweet and was quite aged as well, and tasted the wine and went, oh, I can't believe that Chenin Blanc is like this. And as a consequence, I spent a little bit of time in the Loire Valley with my friends there. And I want to tell you, if there's a revolutionary place in Europe as a wine growing, one of the revolutionary places of wine growing in Europe, it's the Loire Valley. My God, it's just so cool. And the next generation's coming on, they're making all these nice, interesting, funky wines, and then the classics from the Loire Valley. Have you been to La Dive in Angers?
No, I haven't been.
Oh God, you'd go crazy there. It's amazing. All this group of artisan wine growers, amazing. Oh.
Amazing, right?
And, yeah.
So the evolution of style for some of your white wines in Gisborne is what I'm keen to understand, and also just talking about a couple, if you could tell us a couple of really strong vintages from Gisborne and why they were particularly good.
Right. The evolution of style is quite interesting because it may not be pertinent to say it here, but you know, for one of our best wines, we got 83 points the other day out of 100.
Which
and
wine?
I'm sitting there going, it doesn't matter. But the person who was tasting it didn't understand phenolics and flavor and bitterness. They're used to tasting wines that have had all of these things stripped out of them. Stripped out, and they become pretty little darlings that you drink and you look and you get at 98 points. And I was really pissed off to only get 83 points. But then I realized, that's okay. People are not understanding this evolution of where wine is going to as a real natural product.
And so if any of the grapes have kind of shown more in terms of diversity of style over the last 30 years, would you single out a grape for showing more diversity over the last 30 years?
Ooh, this is difficult because, you know, New Zealand hangs its hat very successfully on Sauvignon Blanc. And then there's a diversity in style of coming out of that. And for us in our region here with our particular soil types and our geographical location, and we're quite aromatic, I'd really put my hat down to Viognier and her pretty cousins, Marsanne, Roussanne, and Vermentino.
Have you planted any Marsanne or Roussanne?
We have Marsanne, and we had Roussanne and Vermentino until about a month ago, and that property, unfortunately, we sold that property, which had Roussanne and Vermentino and Muscat. So I'd just like to say that again, Gisborne is kind of like the Roussillon area of France, where it was a bulk wine area, and now we have these interesting white co-fermentations and white blends being made from, as I said, Roussanne, Marsanne, Vermentino, Viognier. So going forward, we'll have more of those sort of things, those sort of wines. But in New Zealand here, the consumer is still used to monocepage, or, you know, only one variety, Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay or Chenin Blanc, something like that. Whereas we just want to have a white wine like Muscadamas-Garsac or La Soule in the south of France. Just that's beautiful, and you drink it and you enjoy it, and it's just, stop it.
Oh, stop it. So we're getting back to all those wonderful crunchy textures and things that liven our palates, aren't we? And those are the things I think you're referring to with your family wines and the collection of wines that you have within your fold. So I think, I mean, I've always said that your Chenin Blanc is one of my 3 most favorite wines of any wine that's ever been produced from New Zealand. It's my go-to.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah,
Thanks.
because it's just got this wonderful kind of lifted characteristic to it. It's still crunchy and fresh. You know, it's developing. I think, you know, what the vines in New Zealand are still so youthful compared to the rest of the world. But there's an evolution with that wine which I've followed over the last few years, which completely gobsmacks me every time I put it in my mouth. So thank you for producing such beauty.
I just have to say this to you, that after the 2020 vintage, honestly, we picked the grapes. This is Chenin Blanc. We picked the grapes, pressed them delicately, as you do. You know, you're in a hurry. But we pressed them delicately and put them into the barrels. And all 3 of us, Timothy in the cellar and our son Sam and myself, we all just tasted this juice in the barrels, and we just looked at each other and went, I can't believe it tastes. And it was just... 2020 has just been the most
amazing
I can't
vintage.
believe how good it's been. Our Chenin Blanc this year is just, you can drink it now.
Fabulous. So we're hearing wonderful reports from pretty much every region across New Zealand. I don't think anyone had a bad 2020 aside from the lockdown measures and issues that were enforced on everybody, of which we feel your pain, but overall I think 2020 was amazing for New Zealand, wasn't it? I think we've lost him. We're looking forward to trying the 2022, Mark, when it finally gets here. What's going on? For James to come back into the... Oh, now he's left. Hang on. Let's try again. Dum, dum, dum. Oh, he declined. I don't know why I always seem to have trouble Go live with James Millton. Waiting for James Millton. Here we go.
And there we are again.
Oh, I
What
thought you
happened?
ditched me.
God damn it, at this time of the morning.
Gosh.
Now, where were we?
We were talking about 2020 vintage in New Zealand and how amazing it was. And then I want to talk about next generation New Zealand and your children and what they're doing and how New Zealand's changing and all those other wonderful things.
Yeah, well, okay, 2020 has been great throughout New Zealand, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole lockdown business was quite interesting because suddenly we had bubbles of people that we had to work with, 2 meter distance. And our picking crew went from 23 down to 9 because people had to go home and isolate themselves and stuff. And so we had people living here on the property and they're about on the vineyards. And so we were isolated in our own little bubbles. And it was quite an interesting social interchange and very stressful to try and get great spectrum. That everybody in New Zealand actually experienced that as well. So it's that's going to go down in the social impact of vintage 2020. I saved quite a lot of money in beer actually, because normally beer at the end of the day.
Staff bonding sessions.
We weren't allowed to have drinks, you know. Gosh, it was terrible. I was so frustrated.
So your son Sam is he's up to some exciting projects. Was he opening a bar or is he doing something?
Oh, he's got this coolest little bar in Gisborne called Suduri Bar. Suduri.
Oh, and
he serves cocktails and serves natural organic biodynamic wine from throughout the world and puts on these amazing little tasting platters. It's just a little small thing, but of course he's been shut down as well, so he's been working hard in the winery.
Hey, so we've got a question from Victoria and Mark here. Due to COVID, were you still able to 100% hand pick?
Right. So we do hand pick, but going through COVID this year, when we lost all our pickers, we had to get a machine in and pick several parcels of grapes at the end. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to. But this year, you know, we picked 18 tons of grapes in one day, which is about 10% of our production. Yeah, it was stressful. So sorry, we didn't do it all by hand.
I think you're excused for that. So talk to us a little bit more about Sam's role and how he fits into the family winery, because I know you have a daughter in Australia as well, and she's also making wine.
Yes.
So
it seems to be they have dirt under their fingernails. Yeah.
They do. I wonder where they got that from.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing, because you can attend every university and do every degree and read every book and attend every lecture and go to every workshop and stuff like that. But if you ain't got dirt under your fingernails, you don't comprehend the true meaning of what it is that you're trying to conceptualize. I say that a little bit arrogantly. So,
well, you're very blessed that both your children do.
Okay, you still there? You just pause for a bit.
Yeah, so I don't know what's happening.
He's doing his wine bar, and then he's making his own wine in amphoras, which is interesting, like skin fermented wines in amphora. And this is kind of what this new generation is doing these days. You're finding more and more and more, not necessarily the amphoras, but skin fermented, nice, yummy, natural wines. And Monique, our daughter's up in the Basket Range of South Australia in the Adelaide Hills, making the most electric wines, because up there they've got quartz and there's some limestone and then there's clay holding it all together, and it's up at 550 meters above sea level.
Amazing.
So the wines have got the most amazing power, you know, compared to us down at sea level here.
Yeah.
That's enough.
That's enough.
Are they curvy style amphora? This is what Real Liquid Filter is talking about. And no, these amphora or tintinaya come from Spain. And we would love to get the curvy from Georgia, but just haven't quite got the spondulies or the time to get over to Georgia and buy some. Someone's bringing them into Australia. Curvy are great because they got the bottom like that, whereas the amphoras have got a bottom like that. if we're talking about bottoms, that
And
is.
are they the same? Are they the same size? Did you say?
They can be all different sizes. It's a shape, really, because the whole idea is it's in a shape like, how do I do this? It's in a shape like you get this figure of 8 flow of energy inside the vessel itself, so which means that the wine is always sort of not moving. You can't see it moving, but there is a current that's going in it. Really.
And so what size amphoras do you have?
Sorry?
Do you have amphoras at Millton, and what size are they?
They are 500 litres.
Okay.
And
was there any particular reason why 500 litres, you chose 500 litres, or?
Those were what were available, and now you can get eggs, clay vessels in the shape
smaller
of eggs.
ones.
No, 500 litres, it was just a, you can get all sorts of different sizes.
So if we just I could ask you the comparison of what a 500 litre amphora versus a smaller sized egg would give you in terms of texture and flavour profile to, say, Chenin Blanc, for instance. What are the kind of differences that you would see from those two vessels?
Well, I don't know, because I haven't witnessed the smaller vessels, but it's about surface to volume ratio of the skins and the amount where the liquid forms, whether the solids are down here and the surface to volume. So I like 500 litres and bigger, because you can leave the grapes in the vessels for a lot longer, because they don't then get tart. And for Chenin Blanc, which doesn't necessarily reside on its its phenolics, it resides on its acidity. We put some Chenin Blanc into amphora, but it's not a variety that we would choose to put into amphora for a long time, because of the acid. We'd lose the acid. Okay,
amazing.
Look at this man. This man worked at Millton Vineyards in 1314. Unforgettable.
Oh, wine advisor. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
So tell us what your biggest learning has been over your 35 years in Gisborne in terms of the environment and your terroir.
Oh, that's a multi-angle question.
Multifaceted question.
I suppose that the thing to say is when to know when to do nothing.
To know. And I think maybe that's something as your winemaking career has evolved as well. It's learning maybe when to step back and not touch things. Is that
yes, it's kind of like a these are all words that people use. It's kind of like a midwife. You've got to learn how to care for something with passion and delicacy and love and ease, as opposed to saying, here's a product, we're going to take it from here to there and bang. It's an evolutionary thing. And also the interesting thing, having Sam around, having Sam in the vineyard now, you're getting these young people coming up with new ideas. Why do you want to do that? You should want to do it like this.
Do you find that he questions your decisions? Does he challenge you?
No, he's not a challenging type of a person, but he's just got some divine wisdom that he puts on the table, and it makes you stop and think. It's really quite interesting. I mean, this is wine families and people of my age, you've got to actually learn how to bite your tongue, and as you can realize, I'm not very good at doing that.
No, I've learned that.
Hey, do you know what, Mel? These two wines that I've got here today, the Chenin Blanc and the Viognier,
yes,
they just won gold medals and trophies in London.
Oh,
yeah!
Congratulations!
So that was a real big buzz, because this is an Assam award as opposed to a sniff, sip, and spit wine judging.
And I think I've always loved your wines from a sommelier aspect as well, because I've worked in restaurants and being able to recommend them with food. They're just such versatile wines that have texture and flavour profiles that you don't necessarily see from New Zealand. When we try and look past Sauvignon, which we love and adore in its own special right. But there are so many other things to discover from New Zealand, and I'm a huge champion of trying to get people to see and understand these varietals and these vineyards that and regions also that are in the shadow of Marlborough Sauvignon. So thank you for producing amazing wines. And I think we have, what's this? Being biodynamic in New Zealand, are you regularly checked by the certification bodies? Who are they, and what kind of checks do they insist on?
Oh my golly, we haven't got another 20 minutes, have we?
Holy moly, that's a big question.
Yeah, so we're certified organic, and we get audited every year, and we're certified biodynamic, and we get audited every year, and we have the wine standards management plan, and we get audited every year, and we have the health department come along and they check us out, and we have someone else comes in. We have 5 audits, and the Demeter one is a year. Yeah, 5% of our income goes out in compliance costs.
It's crazy, isn't it? And I think a lot
Whereas if I use Roundup, or if I use
you don't need to do
Roundup, they don't want to know nothing. But they're going to ban that in a year's time in New Zealand. It's the most exciting news that's come out just lately. 2021, no more Roundup.
Woohoo! So I just wanted to I know we've spoken a lot about white varietals, but I wanted to touch on Crazy by Nature, but then also your Pinot, because I think your Pinot, how many other producers produce Pinot Noir in Gisborne, and is there anyone else further north that plants?
Oh, there's Darling's arrived. Morning, Rosie.
Oh, morning, Rosie Finn.
Hello.
Jason Yank. Good morning, everybody.
Jace. There's only one
Concentrate. Back in the room.
Yeah, sorry. The sun's just coming up.
Oh.
Time to go to work.
Yeah, nearly.
Pinot Noir, yes, we are quite serious about growing Pinot Noir. And
how old are your Pinot vines?
What's this here? 2020. 19 years old.
Okay.
And some other ones are 32 years old.
Okay. And they all go into the Millton range.
They go into the Millton range, but there's a little Louis D, or a little special slope on the vineyard there that goes into the Clos de and Pinot Noir range. Okay.
So I didn't realize you made the Clos de and Pinot Noir. I thought there was only a couple of whites from that range. So that's interesting to hear. I don't know if
there's Pinot Noir and there's Syrah as well. Because when they said when we turned to 2000, they said the world was going to warm up, and we thought, holy Toledo, we should stop concentrating on Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and look at Viognier and Syrah. So we put that, and since then the world's it hasn't hotted up at all.
Dang.
No, not here. Yeah, dang.
Dang.
So Cosmo Red is made of Malbec, Syrah, and Viognier. And it's sort of like our everyday drinking wine. It's got some complexity.
Nice.
It's like if you see it on actually we sold some to Australia some years ago, 5 years ago, and they said to us, this is an Australian saying to a Kiwi about a red wine, okay? They said, perfect product, perfect price, perfect package, bring it on.
Wow!
And I thought, holy, that was 98 points as far as I was aware.
Crazy. It's amazing, isn't it? What a lovely thing to hear about your wines. I've always loved your Crazy by Nature range, and particularly the Cosmo Red. It's just so crunchy and full of life, and it just has this energy and spirit behind it that is just gorgeous, with lovely flavor profile.
It's got a little bit of a eucalyptic twang too, because of this eucalyptic trees going on the vineyard.
Wonderful.
So we'll try and build that into it. In fact, I'll have to tell you, for the first time ever, and this is due to the influence of Sam, we have Malbec sitting on skins, and it's been for 2 months on skins, and you never, ever, ever, ever do that to a red wine. But
wow.
This year, they had all this flavour just under the skins and around the pips and stuff like that. And Sam said, come on, let's just do some extension on this. So it's sitting in the tank. We're going to press, what's today, Wednesday? We're going to press it tomorrow when the moon is in the right phase.
Yeah.
So exciting. I've got to squeeze myself every day.
Oh, how exciting. Now, what have we got here? How are the last vintages, 18, 19, and 20?
18 and 19 weren't as good as 20, and 19 wasn't as good as 18, if that's one way of putting it.
A roundabout way to do it.
2020 is like 83, 86, 89, 98, and
20.
And 2020, you know.
So the
last this has been the best year in the last 3 years.
Did you say 1998?
Yeah.
2020 matches 98 in terms of quality that you've seen so far, or?
Yeah, in terms of phenolic ripeness, and 89.
Amazing. So let's talk nitty gritty biodynamics for a second, because we haven't really touched on the farm and the entity being one, and how you managed to encapsulate everything, every being within your farm. Talk to us about a little couple of things that you do that are integral to your biodynamic farming.
I think, first of all, I don't know whether we said it early on, that we have to understand that bio is life and dynamic is energy. So it is about life energy, which is the most exciting thing that you could ever research. And the thing about this life energy is what makes you tick, what makes it tick. And so you have to have the sensitivity to pick up the soil and smell it and listen to the twitter of the birds. And I'm not trying to be romantic at this early time of the day, but listen to the twitter of the birds out there and see the clarity of the sky and breathe the freshness of the air. So it's about earth, water, air, and light. And it's based on the philosophy of Dr. Rudolf Steiner. He gave these lectures in 1924. We're just a few years away from celebrating the centenary of it. And we make preparations which are made from different flowers and animal parts, and we also make a preparation from this little quartz crystal here, called Preparation 5-1. That's the air and the light. So we make these preparations which happen to grow on our own farm. It's made from yarrow, dandelions, chamomile, nettle, bark of an oak tree, valerian. And so the whole idea is to try and keep the balance between winter and summer as to how the season is growing.
The flow of the seasons.
Yes, between winter, spring, summer, and autumn, and earth, water, air, and light, and sweet, sour, salt, and astringent, and Winnie the Pooh, and Piglet, and Eeyore, and Tigger. Do you know that one?
No.
Well, you know, for you people living in England, one of the greatest things I loved was reading Winnie the Pooh. And you look at the 4 characters in Winnie the Pooh, and you look at the 4 elements of the earth.
They come together.
And they all match up between whether you're melancholic, sanguine, choleric, or phlegmatic.
Oh.
You know? So you working in the SOM industry with your, in the food industry with your front of house people and your wait staff, it's always interesting to find out what type of person they are as to how they're going to serve the food and how they're going to interrelate with the customer, because that is the same thing as how we interrelate with our environment. We have our own cows and sheep and chooks and stuff like that. Just like
question from Hannah. Do you make your own preparations, James?
Yes. There's Hannah. Hello, Hannah. Yes, we make our own preparation 500, and then this preparation here, and we put them in these cow horns like this, you know. And then we make some of the other preparations as well. They're more tricky and take a bit more time. But we make our own preparation 500 and the barrel manure and the quartz crystals. And
amazing.
Other ones. And we're now making tea from willows, and tea from stinging nettles, and tea from cleavers, and tea from the bark of an oak tree. And this means that we're able to not use as much sulfur in the vineyard to protect against oidium or mildew.
And it comes back to this self-sustainable entity, doesn't it?
Well, the funny thing is that a dear man in California, his name is Ted Lemon from Literite, and he put us on to making oak bark tea.
Yeah.
And of course, me being a left-handed Virgo, I had to have it exactly. You know, how do you do it, Ted? How do you do it? He says, James, just take the oak bark, boil it in water, and taste it. And if it pleases you, the taste, then it's right to use. And I thought, holy hell, that's so simple, isn't it? Don't you think? Because if it pleases you to do it, then when you're doing the job, you're happy and you're there.
Absolutely. And it makes you tick. And that's what forms the basis of everything that you do, isn't it?
Yeah, what makes you tick? Morning Quartz Reef down there. That must be Leanne.
Oh, yeah, it must be.
What makes you tick? Yeah, that's the thing. It's, you know, it's about... There's this word that is used in agriculture all the way through, and that is disease, dis-ease. And you know, from the English language, we have dis is in front of like disappointment or disillusioned or disenfranchised, disappointed. And we have this word dis-ease. And so the interesting thing with dis-ease is that you take the dis and put it over there, and then you're left with the ease. And our job, therefore, in the vineyard and in the winery and in the marketplace as well, is just to farm ease.
Amazing.
Get the good stuff going.
Get the good stuff going. Well, that was a lovely chat.
What's on your menu at the laundry?
At the moment, we're no longer a restaurant, so we've turned into a general store. So we believe we're curating everybody's wine, coffee, and general store necessities for survival in Brixton at the moment. Because we've got a few big commercial supermarkets in Brixton. There's not a lot of kind of smaller places to buy fruit and veg and produce from. What we our ethos behind it and our philosophy behind it is trying to support the suppliers in which we bought from that all of a sudden we stopped buying from for the last 2 months. So trying to support the farmers and the people who are still farming and growing for the restaurant industry that all of a sudden didn't have anywhere for their produce to go. So this allows us to continue selling their products and to create something slightly different. We had to act a little bit malleably and think about, what can we do in order to support who we are, but equally the people that support us, both from our customer point of view and also our suppliers. So we're acting as another conduit in the food chain, but no menu items as yet, but lots of good coffee, lots of good fruit and veg. We're starting to think about menus for our pre-prepared offering next week. So we're thinking about things like Scotch eggs and homemade stuff and things to take on picnics and making homemade focaccia and porchetta sandwiches with pesto and yummy stuff like that.
Where do you get all these ideas from? You've been like this all your life, haven't you?
No, I have. I've surrounded myself with smart people who help inspire me. So I'm very, very fortunate to have an amazing team.
It's such a good job what you're doing, and it must be hard for everybody.
It is. Anyway,
there's our dear friend Sarah Fogarty asking any bark tea, and it's really oak bark tea.
Oak bark tea.
Yeah.
Where's she going to find oak bark tea from up here, I wonder?
Like out on the heath.
Out on the heath. We're not allowed out, really, although we're allowed out.
Well, when you're allowed to go for a walk in the park, take a little knife and go and cut some oak bark and take it home and make some tea and drink it.
Well, on that lovely note, I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you for always being my spiritual homie and for bringing us amazing wines to the UK. You're imported by Bibendum up here, so they are reasonably readily available now, aren't they?
I would like to think so.
They are. Yeah. Bibendum are doing a great job. It still means I've got
to go and put leather on their pavements.
Quick hello to Keelan, who used to work with me, who hosted the tasting with you a couple of years back, James. He's saying hello.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah. That was great.
So thank you very much.
Hi, Zach.
And we'll chat to you again soon. If I don't see you up here, I'll see you down there.
This is amazing. I've never done something like this before, and it's quite a new way of
chatting,
communicating, and also, doing wine
stuff.
Yeah, it's good.
Virtual wine stuff.
Yeah. Nice to see Zach and Leanne and
everyone's saying it's like everyone else is having their own conversation.
And there's Zach. G'day, Zach. This is amazing. We should do this all day. I mean, shit, at 7 o'clock in the morning, drinking Viognier. Let's drink Viognier all day.
Well, maybe we're going to have a recap in a month's time and check in and see how 2020 is going and further dive into your brain about biodynamics and all things Millton. But for today, my phone's going to run out of battery.
Mine too. But in a month's time is another lunar cycle. So let's get onto the same lunar cycle next month and we'll have a chat about something else.
Brilliant. All right. Sending you lots of love. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Ciao.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.